Welcome to Power Struggle. I'm your host, Stewart Muir. Today's guest is Brian Jean, Alberta's Minister of Energy and Minerals. It's great to have you in the studio today, Minister.
Great to be here, Stewart. Thanks for the invite.
It's been a while in the making, and there's so much to talk about. Brian brings a rare perspective to the energy conversation. He served in federal politics. He led a provincial opposition party. He now sits at the cabinet table at a time when Alberta's energy sector is under intense global scrutiny. Before politics, he built a career in law and business in northern Alberta, giving him firsthand experience with the communities most directly affected by energy policy. In this conversation, we're going to talk about where Alberta fits in on the world energy stage. From OPEC and Venezuela to North American energy security, we're going to dig into what it really takes to get Canadian energy to global markets, the thinking behind recent agreements like the MOU agreement with Prime Minister Mark Carney, and how Canada and the United States fit into Alberta's long-term energy future. It's a timely conversation. Here we are at the end of January 2026. It's about realism, the choices that will shape Canada's economic future. So let's get into it. Brian Jean, I know you're most associated with Fort McMurray, but I believe you have a British Columbia story too.
I was born in British Columbia, in West Kelowna, West Bank at the time. But I was born there, and most of my family, a couple generations on my mom's side and a generation or two on my dad's side. So we actually are from BC. We moved from Kelowna, West Bank, up to Fort McMurray back in 1967. But most of my family still reside in the BC, Kelowna, and North areas. 1967,
centennial year. That was the year my family went from Lethbridge to Vancouver. And we had our own trajectory from there. Isn't it something how interlinked BC and Alberta are? It's like almost everyone you meet, they've got some linkage. But when you get to the politics, it feels like these are divided kingdoms. Do you ever sense that the Rockies are this big divide?
Well, I'm from a big family of 11 kids, so I can tell you we have lots of different decisions and different priorities from time to time, but it's no different for BC and Alberta. We're a family, and we have to work together to get things done if we have a united purpose and to make things better for ourselves and our families and our future. And I think that's what it's all about, is a partnership with family.
Well, I really like what you expressed this week, because you stood with the other energy and minerals ministers in Vancouver at the big Roundup conference, and you've come up with a new agreement on how to work together collaboratively. I think that's what Canadians hope to see in leadership, so I hope that agreement. Can you tell me a little about that
Sure.
deal?
I think Canadians expect us to work together for the future, because the future is there. We just have to seize it. The MOU itself is about critical minerals, and it's about how we cooperate together to make things better, to have a united front with Ottawa, who is also our partner, and making sure that we set our priorities. We have some priorities that are very important to the nation. For instance, in the north, Hay River, there's a rail situation there that is desperate. And if we're going to see our north expand and grow, we need to work with the Northwest Territories to make sure that Ottawa understands that's a critical infrastructure piece. We also have other pieces around Alberta and BC that are very, very important. And those pieces are important not just for quality of life for people, which of course it is, but it's also important for jobs and making sure that this infrastructure, whether it's road or rail, provides economics so that people can have the great quality of life that we expect.
You call that an MOU, not to be mistaken with that other MOU that's the national one with the Prime Minister. So
a great agreement with the government of Canada and Alberta, great agreement.
Yeah, and we're going to come into that because I think there's a lot of questions that people have got
Very
as
happy
that
to
progresses.
see that.
There's some milestones coming up that were agreed to last fall. But here's the number 2 question I've got for you, Minister. As Alberta's energy minister, what perception about Alberta from outside Alberta would you most like to change if you could?
Stewart, I have to tell you, I don't know perceptions that people have about Albertans, that well. I can't really tell you how we should change to meet other people's expectations. But what I can tell you is we all have priorities across this great country, depending on where we're from and our experiences from then to now. But that doesn't mean we can't compromise and work with other people to find that ultimate purpose. And we don't have to be ideological about it. What we have to do is be honest and have honest conversations and work towards making that agenda fit all Canadians equally. Because that's what we're all about, is one big family, one big nation, tied together. We have constitutional rights to be able to get our products to market. Those constitutional rights need to be respected. We need to work together to make sure that they're as good for BC going through Alberta as they are for Alberta going through BC.
Now, you're kind of a distinct voice because you're from Fort McMurray. I know that there's now an MP, Billy Morin, who is also from Northern Alberta, who's brought that perspective to Ottawa. But you've consistently over many years done that in Alberta. And I just hope you could explain a little bit to give listeners a sense of just what it means to be from that community. I mean, the ups and downs. You've got the commodity price cycles. We had the fire years ago and the crisis there that you were in the community leadership mix there. What is the sense of place and self that Fort McMurray folks have?
Well, we have a lot of pride in what we do. We do it better than anybody else on the planet. So, that's important to us. We also recognize that the outdoors are important. We are guardians of the wilderness, and we respect that. We also work very closely with First Nations, and we have a lot of partnerships there, and we're proud of that as well. So I think we're on the forefront of energy, of the energy future that's necessary in order to get our products to market, but also the rest of the world should see what we're doing, and they are. Alberta's Indigenous Opportunities Corp lends money, taxpayer money, to First Nations for very good, high return on investment projects, and that lifts those people out of poverty. And that is an example that the federal government has emulated, and now BC has emulated, and other provinces are looking at it. It's something that we're very proud of because that came out of Alberta and came out of the North and the need to work with First Nations and other partners to get these projects off the ground and make sure we bring the quality of life to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's not that hard to go and find the energy experts, the policy people, the academics, the CEOs in Calgary who can give their side of the transformation story of Alberta energy. From a community point of view, though, how do you see Fort McMurray residents and Northern Albertans in general being part of this, shift towards making Canadian energy, crude oil in particular, which is our most valuable export, last time I checked.
By far.
Making it the thing that is, Canadia's vision for the future?
Well, I think it's first of all that we have to recognize that we're a community and the communities have to be supported. So wherever those communities are across Northern Alberta and Northern BC, they need to be part of the equation and they need to be true partners in the decision making, but also moving forward and actually seeing the benefits come to those communities. Sometimes we see boom and bust with those energy communities and resource-based communities, and we need to try to have a government move away from that so we have a more stable, long-term view of these things. And that doesn't mean that we hire and fire people by the thousands every year in a small town like Fort McMurray. It means we actually look at building those community jobs, the structures of those jobs, move away from the fly-in, fly-out model that's very popular. It was with Site C as well.
I hear the same exact thing in Northern BC, Northwest, Northeast.
It's terrible. Yeah. It really destroys families. Yeah. And it's, I was a lawyer in Fort McMurray for years, and I can tell you that whether it's divorces or criminal law, the camps kept me very busy and not good, in a good way.
Have they improved over the years in the practices that?
No, they have not. They, in fact, I'd say they've gone away from it. In the old days, they had a lot more freedoms to drive to and from camps, from the community, so they could live in Fort McMurray. And now they can't do that. Unfortunately, for many of the camps don't allow them to commute back and forth. They give you a variety of reasons, but the truth is, when you fly a person into a camp and you have a bus that takes them to their house or their room, and then takes them back and forth from work, you have a captured audience. You have barbed wire, you have the jumpsuits, you have everything except for the guards. But the truth is, they're not allowed to leave. They're there. It's a workforce that they control, and they want to be able to control it because it controls the uncontrollables. Sick or kids sick or things like that. Normal things that everybody else deals with. We have some camps right now. They're like 5 minutes outside of Fort McMurray. 5,000 people working and living. 5 minutes out from Fort McMurray. Meanwhile, we have a ton of people that are unemployed, and the housing prices. If you want to move and get a great investment in a house, you could sell your house in Vancouver and buy about 5 or 6 in Fort McMurray.
What's the pitch for living in Fort McMurray if you're making that?
Greatest place in the world to live. You've got 5 rivers flowing into the city itself. If you like the outdoors, it's amazing. Great quality of life. Highest household income in the country for years and years, and one of the lowest cost structures. The people in Fort McMurray, the difference between us and many other environments is we actually know that we have to work hard, but we also know we have to play hard during the wintertime because we get what is called cabin fever. And, when you have snow around you all the time and you're isolated inside and, many people don't get out like I do with snowmobiles and different things like that out in the cold, skiing and snowboarding. But the truth is they need a vacation away. The good news is when you live and work in Fort McMurray, you can afford to own a condo in Vegas or somewhere else that's warm so you can go down there and enjoy that. So the truth is the people that have been very successful there recognize that you have to work within the situation we have, and that means, work and play when you can. Great community to be from, though. I have to tell you, I've lived there all my life, and it's an incredible community.
Yeah, you've been up there for a long time, since
67.
67.
But I will tell you, Stewart, I want people to know that not only have I lived in Fort McMurray, I've lived in Australia for 3 years. I lived in Portland, Oregon for 4 years. I lived in Ottawa for 10 years as an MP. I've seen the world. I've seen much of the world, and I don't think there's any better place.
For listeners who don't follow energy policy super closely, how would you describe Alberta's role in the Canadian economy and the energy story that's part of that?
Well, Stewart, it's shocking, to be honest. If you look at Alberta versus the rest of the world, we're the fourth largest reserve of heavy oil on the planet, and that's at 10% capability from the natural resource. Like if we get to 20%, we're going to be the largest reserve in the planet as far as being able to extract it from the oil sands. We have the 9th largest reserve of natural gas in the world with BC. We have the 3rd largest lithium deposit in the world and the lowest cost extraction method through brine. And the opportunities in Alberta are amazing because we're actually using our oil and gas infrastructure to now get lithium out of it, and we don't have to drill the new holes. We can do that. So we're trying to find as many opportunities as we can for the current infrastructure, which includes geothermal. So there's a lot of different opportunities. And when I say Alberta is a leader in energy, it truly is a world leader in energy, because we have the capacity, but we also have the capability. A lot of people don't know this, but more than 50% of the mining companies in the world are Canadian companies, and most of those companies are from Alberta. The drilling expertise that we have is exported to Australia for specialty projects on drilling. The drillers and the people that work in the oil and gas industry in Alberta are known as some of the best in the world. And they go all over the world helping other companies to do what they do. The Alberta Energy Regulator as well is an incredible regulator. We have people from all over the world come over and say, how do you do this? Could you show us how to set up a regulator? And so we do that as well. So we really do punch above our weight. And we're working right now with BC and Saskatchewan to try to get our regulations cohesive so that we can have a more attractive environment for all of the outside players. For instance, we share gas fields in northern BC and Alberta, for instance. I mean, we should have similar regulations so that the companies can move back and forth and they don't have to worry about all that red tape that really doesn't mean anything, doesn't accomplish anything, but is quite a burden.
Mm-hmm. Just to zoom out, when you look at the provinces, because you're mentioning Saskatchewan and BC as well as Alberta in the story, and they are connected by geology, this thing known as I hate to use it, it's such a mouthful and no one really knows what it means. Well, you do, I know, but Western Sedimentary Basin or Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin. What is that? And more importantly, what does it mean to the future of the country that this vast deposit exists with all of these mineral and petroleum riches?
Well, it means nothing if we don't do it right. You can have the best quality product on the planet, but if you don't know how to sell it and nobody's prepared to buy it because they don't like it, you're not going to get any benefit. But if we have one of the richest places in the world to provide, product to the people of the world. And whether it be energy poverty, there's a lot of people that die as a result of not having proper energy. 8 million people plus a year just from burning dung and wood and other things that they could have natural gas for next to nothing right now if we could just get our stuff together and make that happen. And whether it's oil, which makes over 6,000 different products, including cell phones and computers and even these mics and your eyeglasses, people don't realize how many different products we can get from heavy oil and how important it is. And then we haven't even talked about coal, and we have a huge coal deposit that we're going to be using to make steel, which of course is necessary. And what does this mean? Well, geopolitically, Alberta and BC and Saskatchewan could actually change the fate of the world just based on what we do with our energy. Because as you know, Japan, the Second World War from Japan was started as a result of energy the lack of energy and the control of energy by another power. We're looking at Russia and China and other nations right now, and there's a lot of turmoil. Well, we put 3 million barrels a day of crude into the Pacific. All of a sudden, it changes the storyline for everybody. We put a lot of natural gas, LNG, into the Pacific. It changes the story for everybody. And that doesn't even mean we get into Africa where it's really needed, or Europe where, frankly, they're being manipulated by energy from a superpower. Those things, we can stop that from happening and change the world to be a better place.
If you look back to the middle of 2024, that's when the Trans Mountain expansion was finished, and that added, 600,000 barrels a day to Canadian export potential. What changed because of that? If you look back, now we've got quite a few months of statistics and that performance.
Well, the first thing is that Canadians and the world now know that we can actually build something in Canada. We haven't built a pipeline or energy opportunity for many, many years of any significance. So I think that's a big signal to the capital markets. And in particular, we can't build anything unless we have money. So that was something. We also saw the differential come down a bit, narrow a bit, which was very good because obviously the differential, the difference between what we sell it for and what we get it for, it's been up in the 20s, it's been in the teens for a little while. Now we've got it down a little bit. And that means we get to keep more of that money. Our producers get to keep more of that money. And we send about 3 million barrels a day down to the Midwest, for instance, and we've got good partnerships there, and those relationships have been made, those pipelines have been installed, and we don't see that changing for a long, long time, even with Venezuela.
Now, the energy sector didn't appear overnight. I've been to Leduc, and I've actually stood under by the derrick there, the very first one.
It's a great picture.
It is iconic. It was quite cold, so I got a picture. I think the lens was frozen though. But the energy sector in Alberta didn't appear overnight. It's a long-term process. And how did we get to where we are today? And what is the state today? Like, how would you characterize Alberta? So in particular, the oil sands, and how did that develop?
Well, the energy sector, as you said, has been around for a long time. I mean, the Indigenous folks used to use oil sands to patch their canoes back in the day, and we used it to pave, for instance, Jasper Avenue and in Edmonton, and also in Ottawa, the Parliamentary Hill, we used that to pave that. So we've used energy or oil and those products for a long, long time. But the truth is, it's changed, and now we're seeing the opportunity to create energy from these products around the world and to transport them there. And what we have seen is a restriction of our ability to get resources to market, which obviously suffocates our own ability to grow, while the rest of the world is pouring these dirty, barrels of oil that have no respect for human rights or no respect for women. Meanwhile, our own people are suffering because we can't get pipelines to Tidewater. Right now, if we got a couple of million barrels to the Pacific, it would raise finances tremendously for the people of BC, especially in the North Coast. It would raise about $5 billion a year just for one pipeline for the people of Canada and the people of Alberta. But there would be significant jobs right across the country, including even in Ontario, that makes forklifts and different things. And I was talking to a manufacturing organization in Ontario. They told me that more than 50% of the products come to Alberta in the small equipment that they manufacture from Ontario. And that's not a strange story. Many, many people talk about that. And I can tell you that whether it's Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, there's a lot of people from Atlantic Canada and Newfoundland in Fort McMurray. And in fact, I would suggest most of the people that established Fort McMurray back in the 80s were from Atlantic Canada. It doesn't take much to hear a fiddle in the backyard in Fort McMurray.
Well, you've got a lot of Canadian companies and foreign companies that are present in Calgary who have East Coast operations, and they have global operations, but they're based here. Do you think there's a sense that Canada has some kind of special feature in how it presents itself to the growth in other areas outside Alberta?
Canada as a whole needs to stop apologizing for what we're doing. We are doing it better than anybody else as far as energy production and distribution and human rights. We need to recognize that our oil on the international marketplace is a better barrel of oil than anyone else, and takes dirty oil off the shelves and makes people behave, like Russia and China and other world powers that are frankly big bullies. And Canada as a country can say, hey, you can't do that anymore, or else we're not going to sell you our oil. And I can promise you, China wants our oil. Korea wants our oil. Both of them are getting some right now, and Korea's actually geared up their refineries to take our oil. So, I mean, a lot of countries right now are saying they've tried it, they like it, it's a taste of a great product, and they want more of that product. But do we give that product to our allies? Do we control that product with our enemies? I don't know. Those are bigger questions than me, but we can't do any of that until we get it to the Tidewater. We can't do any of it because right now we send over 90% of our product down to the United States. They dictate prices pretty much to us to a degree, and they dictate how much supply we can actually provide, and they take the profit. They take the value add from the refining, from the upgrading, from the transporting, from making it into LNG, whether natural gas or oil. And how about we do that in Alberta and BC? We would love to see the opportunity, for instance, for an ammonia plant on the coast of British Columbia that actually could supply that to Korea, who wants to cut emissions from their coal-fired plants. Now, and Japan does too, and they want to be able to cut emissions, but they can't do that because they have no secure supply of ammonia. We could do that. BC could do that, and that would be a very profitable venture for them, but it would also help the world. And I think we're in a unique position to do that if we just stop apologizing, stop blaming other people for something that doesn't exist, and frankly, work together to compromise and get things to be better for the people of Alberta, BC, and Canada. And we can do it. We just have to work together to do it and quit making these artificial claims about things that are not true. You know,
Right.
A lot of people do that about crude oil, and it's not true. Fort McMurray is probably the cleanest place I've ever been as far as a provider. Over 99% of all spills for oil happen on an oil sands site. I mean, the 1% or less than 1%, I mean, you should see the emergency crews that go deal with that. It's the perception of people on oil and gas industry in Alberta is not real. We are the best at what we do on the environment, human side, and every other side in relation to energy development.
I had the chance to go out to Meg Energy's Christina Lake SAGD facility
That's a cool
few
facility,
years ago,
yeah.
and you could eat your dinner off the floor in the cogen plant.
It's a matter of pride.
And you know what they had in the residence there was they had a map of wildlife sightings, and it was just all kinds of creatures all over the place at this location.
Any
It was
cougars or grizzlies up
A lot
there?
of cougars.
Yeah.
I didn't spot any grizzlies pins on the map,
They're
but
starting to move away from the mountains, coming up north.
oh, was that a fact?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a lot in BC now because the hunt was ended here. So interesting. That's another story.
We've had some attacks in Alberta, and it's a shame that people can't walk out in the bush without feeling threatened.
It's getting dangerous even for seasoned hunters in BC. Just going back a little bit, there's different kinds. There's light oil, there's medium oil, but then the biggest part, of course, is the heavy oil. And recently, I think everyone in Canada got a taste of geopolitics with Venezuela. Everyone, the experts are on TV talking about heavy oil and a little more consciousness of this and the fact that Russia produces a lot. I didn't see Iraq come up in the discussion, but I know Iraq does produce a lot of that Basra heavy crude that gets into the markets, and I think there's some from West Africa. From the global trade in heavy oil, where does Canada fit in that important niche, and what is that niche?
Well, the niche is, the beautiful part about heavy oil is it makes so many different products. And I mentioned that before, but people don't recognize how many different things you can do with it. And that's what makes it so attractive to most of the refiners around the world. We are a world player now. We're a high-cost producer. The truth is not as high cost as Venezuela, and people don't recognize that, but there is a higher cost to produce Venezuela.
It's more expensive in Venezuela than in Alberta.
In Alberta, you don't have many people shooting at you when you're digging up oil. I mean, we don't have that kind of situation. We have the rule of law apply, and people are well paid, and there's no freebies on there. We have good workforces that follow the rules and do what they're supposed to, and that's not the same in every other country. In fact, very few other countries. So there is a higher cost to it, but there's a better product to it, and I've seen over the years that the better products usually rise to the top. And we want to be in a situation where we sell our product as a premium product and people pay more for it, not less for it. And that's because we do it better and people care about how we do it. They're starting to care more about how we do it, especially in relation to the environment. And people outside of Canada recognize we are the best at it. Inside Canada, we criticize ourselves a lot, but outside of Canada, people see us as the world leader on environmental stewardship, for instance. So I think what you'll see is over time that people will be more prepared to pay for a Canadian product if it's the same price because it's a better product. And in time, maybe we'll see a premium price for that product. And that's what I would like to see. But it's debatable. The biggest issue is, though, no matter what the price is, no matter what the product is, the more we displace from countries that don't treat their people well, the more chance there is those people will change. And the more chance there is the world will be a better, safer place. And that's what I think that we can do as Albertans, as Canadians, is really punch above our weight. We have a small population of 40 million people here. It's a very small population relative to the rest of the world. We have a great quality of life, but we add so many costs to it that it's very difficult for us to then absorb the cost to get it out to market. And that's what we need to look at, is how to cut our costs and still make that great product, but get it to the marketplace so that people can buy it and they displace the other barrels that they're buying currently from Iraq, Iran, and Venezuela and others.
It's almost like we're talking around the thing that has been in the news for a few months now. That's the MOU with the Canadian federal government and Alberta. I'd like to delve into that. I'm sure everyone's got lots of questions and wants to hear what you could tell us about it and where it's going. First of all, let's just describe what it is for those who maybe haven't been following. What is the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between Premier Smith and Prime Minister Carney? So, Minister Jean, it's clearly the case that First Nations in Canada have been denied opportunities for a very long time. There's a movement, I think, embraced by business, by society in general, by governments to change that, to be the generation where First Nations can emerge from those systemic issues of the past. And there are some places in the country that have been more successful. Northern Alberta generally is one of those.
Northern Alberta in particular has done a great job in partnerships with First Nations. And people don't know that, but there's billionaires and multimillionaires out of those First Nations there just from partnershiping with the industry. And in fact, if I can just tell you about Fort McKay, who's, I remember back in the 70s going to Fort McKay and not having electricity.
Fort McKay is very close to Fort McMurray.
It's about 60, 70 kilometers north. And in fact, just about 2 years ago, a lady, a First Nations member that was at an announcement with me, she told me that one of my brothers installed electricity in her home in 1972 in Fort McKay. And I mean, we're friends. I have a lot of family that are First Nations. I have about 30 nephews and nieces that 15 of them were born and raised on reserves. I have a large family. I'm the youngest of 11. And so I've seen these First Nations in those areas, and they're family members. So I get to watch, and I, of course, care. Mackay has their own oil sands lease now. They're working on that. They're going to have an open pit mine on oil sands and do reclamation of that afterwards. And of course, they're stewards of the land, so they're going to do a great job. In fact, they're involved in Suncor and all the other oil sands plants in many aspects, including the environment, to make sure that is done properly. They have preferential treatment for jobs, for purchasing. Billions of dollars in economic activity go directly to First Nations in contracts. 12% of their workforce is First Nation. I know they used to keep track of it. They don't anymore because it's grown so exponentially, the First Nations component of it. First Nations, Métis, and Alberta has a special relationship with their Métis communities too. So they're in a different place than most Métis across the country, and a privileged place, to be honest, in Alberta. So we have done different things. In fact, there's another First Nation up north that is looking and right now negotiating for another oil sands lease. And that's 2 oil sands leases for 2 First Nations in Northern Alberta, both of them seeking the opportunity to lift their people out of poverty. And Fort McKay, have they done a good job? Well, they told me about, 2 years ago, they had $600 million in their bank account, in their investment fund. I would suggest it's over $1 billion now. All their people are working full time. They're making, as I said, the highest household income in the country is Fort McMurray. Fort McKay has probably got a higher one now than they do. And they're going to own not just the lease, but they have a number of companies, and when I say a number of companies, I mean dozens of companies that are highly successful, locally owned by Indigenous people that work right across the spectrum, heavy equipment to scientists. And, I've seen this over the last 30 years in Alberta because that preferential treatment for First Nations and making sure we can lift them out of poverty has happened there for 30 years. It's just starting in BC. Mm-hmm. But the first thing you have to do, Stewart, is you have to talk to them. It would be a novel approach for some governments, but why don't you sit down and find out what they want, what they need, what they care about, what their priority is? Yes, they don't trust you because you lied to them before, but you're a new person. It's a new time, and we need to put it on the agenda. Well, after some period of time, we came to this great agreement, which deals with a number of different things. It talks about a pipeline of at least 1 million barrels to the northwest coast, which of course is in the federal jurisdiction. It's not in the province.
Why to the northwest coast? Why not another part of the BC coast?
Well, it's just like everything. How far you build, it matters how much it costs, and what you build over and how you build it matters how much it costs.
So that's the most direct and efficient route.
$20 to $25 billion. I mean, most experts say it's somewhere in there. You want to build to the Hudson Bay, that's $40 to $50 billion. You want to go down to the U.S., well, why? We already have more pipelines down there than we know what to do with. And certainly I want more egress to go down there. But if we're going to build pipelines, let's build it in a place that really matters. And in Asia right now, we've identified somewhere between 2 and 3 million barrels of demand right now for our heavy crude from Korea and Japan, Malaysia, and many other different countries in there. China especially is looking for our oil. And, we can get it to them and we can make a difference on that. it was called the Grand Bargain, and many people don't know why, but one of the major hurdles to ongoing development for our oil sands has been the federal government concerned about GHG emissions. And although we're under the current average level of oil emissions for any country, all the countries in the world, we're below the average. The truth is the federal government wanted our heavy oil to get even lower intensive GHG emissions. So the grand bargain that many have referred to is we get the pipeline to the Northwest Coast for $1 million plus, and the oil sands players in northern Alberta build what is called pathways, and 7 different companies get together, or 6 different companies get together, and they build a pipeline that will take GHG and force it into the ground into carbon capture and sequestration, which many countries, including Korea and Japan and Europe and the United States, believe that is a big part of our future for greenhouse gas emission control. And so if we do one, we get the other, and that's pretty exciting for me. There was a lot of other things in that agreement, including clean energy regulations that were going to devastate our economy in Alberta. We're private sector for energy, so it's different than every other jurisdiction.
There was a lot of surprise that that condition was accepted.
Yeah, no, and we got a few other things too. I mean, Stewart, the truth is we sat down with the federal government, we did some arm wrestling, and we came up with some good reasons why their position was not the right position for Alberta, because we're different than other provinces. And I don't mean that we're different people. It's just we have a private sector electricity grid. Everybody else has a public sector one. Right. There's different things like that. We have oil sector. We don't have nuclear. So they were trying to make a one size fit everybody in Canada, and you just can't do that. Canada's too big of a country with too many differences. So them sitting down with us, the Prime Minister, Minister Hodgson's, and arm wrestling this deal out. They got some things they wanted. We got some things we wanted. They got a tier price of $1.30 a ton. We got all these other things. But we believe that all of these things are possible within the financial realities that we have to face and still be able to hit the marketplace with it. And as you said, there is no export, nothing in Canada that compares to a bitumen oil pipeline to the coast, and what the value it brings back to the people of Canada is unbelievable. The federal government got some things too, as I mentioned. They wanted to have $130 per ton tier pricing. Well, they've got that. And industry, it's a lot higher than what we originally anticipated. But the truth is that because of the mechanism that we put in place, we think it's going to be very successful, and the businesses will like it. They won't love it, but they will like it. They understand the long-term needs of it.
Now, there was a degree of skepticism that the Prime Minister was serious about this. What did you say to critics who were posing that conundrum?
Well, 20 years ago, I was in the federal politics, and the Prime Minister was the Governor of the Bank of Canada. And when he would come before the Finance Committee, I would ask him the same questions that I'm asking today from different people. And he always had the best answers. He talked about pipelines being the best investment we can make. And this is back in 2012. 2011, when he would come before the Finance Committee, and I'd ask him questions about pipelines and oil, because obviously I'm from that area and it's very near and dear to me, and we've been trying for years to get a pipeline out of there so we could have some growth in the industry. And his position on pipelines and pipeline infrastructure has not changed. And in politics, if you find a person that doesn't change and it speaks truth to power, it's a pretty good chance they're going to follow through with what they say. Now, it's not an easy thing to do because of the nature of Canada and where we are. And, the First Nations in BC, we have to make sure that works out well, same as the First Nations in Alberta, and we have to have that partnership level with them. So it's not going to be without its challenges. But I believe the Prime Minister is sincere. I believe the Minister Hodgson's is sincere. I believe right now they have their own internal political challenges, but they are been honest to us. And if they come forward with this agreement and enforcing their terms of this agreement, I think Canadians are going to have a lot more pride in the government of Canada, and in particular the Prime Minister. We've got our own challenges in Alberta. We've got a separatist movement that's gaining some traction, and it's primarily about pipelines. They just feel that Ottawa takes all our money. They don't have a problem with that and giving us a lot less services back, which they do, about $20 billion a year. But they won't even let us get our products to market, and that is shameful. And we see a new era with this new Prime Minister, and we're very hopeful.
Well, there's a daunting amount of work. I mean, apart from the Pathways commitment, which will require a huge amount of unified direction amongst the big players, but I'm thinking the BC story. And for several years, Premier Smith and Premier Eby have spent a lot of time working together, I think, behind closed doors. And when they come out, they're talking about the collaboration. I think things like hydrogen. You mentioned ammonia, which is needed to make hydrogen, or can be a way of making hydrogen. And they had talks about LNG that have been very unifying. But the MOU, it's hard to see that one yet as a unifier. How do they, if they choose to, between themselves, turn this into a unifying project and concept?
Well, first of all, it is our constitutional right to do what we want to do and wanting to do for 20 years. So let's, you have constitutional rights, I have constitutional rights. How about respecting mine? First of all, that's the first thing. But the truth is, BC needs some things. I mean, there's a structural deficit in BC, and I'm not going to get into internal politics in BC, but I will say this, that if they want to get rid of that structural deficit, they're going to need something besides immigration. And this gives them that opportunity. It also lifts the people of northern BC out of poverty, the First Nations, out of poverty. Like, that's what people don't recognize. Go over to Fort McMurray and see what's happened there. And I will say, I understand, there's some different opinions about bitumen. But if you use a cell phone, if you use a laptop, if you consume it with driving a car or a bus or a plane, then what is your problem with taking Canadian oil that's way better than any other oil, and we do it better than anybody else, and upgrading, refining it, finishing here in Canada, and then consuming it, instead of doing what right now is happening is, the Vancouver airport gets their aviation fuel from Korea, made from Alberta bitumen. Like, isn't that ironic? I think it's, what a shame. How many jobs are we losing on that?
Shipping it over there as a
Should
raw
be right here
material.
in BC.
Yeah.
For jet fuel,
Well,
for sure.
that's a unifier, because Premier Eby in British Columbia has been talking about refinery capacity.
I noticed that. And I would say, too, that the other thing he's talking about is something a lot of British Columbians don't know, is that Alberta has been selling our energy that we get from, we have the most renewables in Canada. Like, we have a lot of renewable energy. And so our wind power, our solar power, that is being sold to BC when it's almost free or free, because sometimes, energy goes up and down, and energy prices are oftentimes free, and we'll sell it to BC for free, and then they'll sell it to California for a lot of money. And that has been actually something that a lot of people don't know, is BC's been making money off our electricity, and now they're running a little bit shorter, and they need some help from the federal government, but they also need help from the province of Alberta. One of the things the agreement between the federal government and Alberta did was it specifically laid the foundation for a nuclear facility that would be able to feed into British Columbia and into our north, into the Yukon and Northwest Territories. And it would be built in Alberta, would be generating nuclear power in Alberta, and then would be feeding the line to BC, because, of course, nuclear can't be built in BC because of their own law, because of BC's law. But we can build it in Alberta, and they can buy it, and then they can sell down to California. And that will help a lot with the structural deficit, but more than that, it'll help the people again in the north with the Northwest Transmission Line, which has been built up. But it's very expensive to run those lines, and if we want to run them into the Yukon, it's, again, very, very expensive and not that efficient, but we have to find other ways to generate power and to get it to the people that need it in order for them to have the quality of life that, Stewart, you and I take for granted. Warm shower and all those things. A lot of people don't have that, even in northern Canada, and they deserve it. They have the right to it.
And to be able to add zero emission electrons to the network is something you want to do more of.
Yeah, but Stewart, I'm going to tell you, like, if you look at the life cycle of all these things, including nuclear, there's nothing that does zero emissions. There's nothing.
There's a lot of cement you got to use to.
Site C. Was that zero emissions? Is that a green and green project? Well, talk to the people in northern Alberta that don't have the water that they want, and you can find out what's going on there. Are you telling me wind isn't? You know how much concrete they use in that? The same amount for, I think, 3 or 4 houses, and it never comes out of the ground, and you bury the windmill blades in there, and you think that's zero emissions? That's zero environmental impact? No, it's not. Same as solar panels, What do we do with the solar panels when we recycle them? Like, have people looked and actually seen what happens to batteries and the life cycle on them? So, it's a balance. It's about finding all of these things and getting the best one that serves people and keeps an environment that's clean. Oil. Heavy oil is it.
Natural gas, big part of that.
It is.
We're in the cold season right now. It's freezing down east, but 2 years ago in January 2024, there was a weather event in Western Canada, also the northwest of the United States, that's been studied to death since then because it exposed there were some weaknesses. I'm sure you get the briefings on this and you're all over this issue, but Alberta in particular had a critical vulnerability after days of 40 below. Have you been studying this occurrence and what its lessons are? And is there anything you can tell us about? What's that all about?
Well, the first thing is I mentioned that we have more renewables in Alberta than anywhere else in the country by quite a bit. And we had more renewable applications because we have a very good environment for renewables as far as the regulatory part. But the truth is that renewables don't run at nighttime and when there's no wind. So, so as a result of that, our alternative energy power was not running and we couldn't make up the base load. So power it's not a simple thing. You add something over here, you lose it over here, you get it over here. Electricity and power and the laying out and the strategy that has to do with electricity has a lot to do with who you connect with, how much power you have. And so it has to be done carefully. And that's why we put a pause on the renewables, just to make sure that we could get our base power up to a place where we wouldn't have those rolling blackouts, because 3 times we were very close to rolling blackouts in Alberta. And that's unheard of in our history because of the nature of our power. But, the NDP, when they were in power, they shut down coal-fired plants, which are still shut down and in Alberta. And so, our industry had to convert very quickly from coal to natural gas. And, when you're doing it that quickly, and you have to, of course, be sensitive to prices because everybody's concerned with affordability right now, and we just have to make sure we do it right. And that's why we had the pause on renewables, just to make sure we could get our base load up and control the renewables as they don't generate when we need it. Because when it's cold, not a lot of wind blows and not a lot of sun shines. That's the truth of it in Alberta. So.
Is it fair to say that Saskatchewan, with its coal-fired baseload, saved Alberta's bacon during that January 2024 event? Because it had the available power?
Saskatchewan's my good friend. I'm never going to say they saved us for anything. I love those guys. They. I don't know if their coal-fired plant saved us. I'm not sure, but I'll tell you, whenever Saskatchewan needs us, we'll be there for them because they've been a very good brother to us, a sister to us. They're very good friends. We have a lot in common. Just like for a long time we did with BC, and we believe that we will with BC again because there's anomalies and governments change and things happen, but people care about affordability right now. People care about the economy and the quality of life. And you want to raise people up out of poverty, get 3 oil pipelines, 1 million barrels each through northern BC. And that will raise the people of BC, northern BC, out of poverty for sure. And the people of Canada. It'll help us a lot. And the last prime minister we had spent a ton of money, more money than anybody spent in the history of Canada. And he spent it on things that were not good investments. That's the truth. And no matter what you think of him, you can look at the history, and it was not a great investment opportunity for us. It was a huge spending opportunity. And now we have a lot of people that don't have houses, for instance, in Canada, because we allowed a lot of people in, 2 million people in, and we can build 100,000 houses a year. So, things were done politically that weren't strategically to the people of Canada's advantage. I think this government, this Canadian government, and the province of Alberta and Saskatchewan for sure are going to be looking at ways to make sure that we have timed processes on our investments and immigration and making sure we respond accordingly. We had record house building in Alberta this year, more than any other province in Canada. We were able to, because of our private sector, we can stimulate that growth just through them recognizing the need, and we were able to do that. So, but affordability is the key, and the people of BC are going to, as their housing prices increase and as the cost of living gets worse, and as the cost of groceries gets worse, and now electricity is going to go up in BC. All of these things along with the structural deficit, because remember, when you have a structural deficit, you pay interest on that structural deficit, and the people of BC are paying on that right now, as well as the structural deficit of Canada. I mean, we're paying so much in debt right now that we could do so many schools and hospitals and roads and bridges and houses with that extra money that we're paying off on interest, because in my mind, that's nothing but bad management. And successive governments, provincial and federal, have done a bad job at managing our economy.
Well, a lot of British Columbians are voting with their feet. They're moving to Alberta to be able to find that house for their family that they can afford.
Well, come on down. We love them.
Yeah.
We love people coming to Alberta. We really do. We have an incredible province with an incredible future, and we're hoping BC will join us on that.
There's something speaking as a native-born Albertan, there's something about problem solving and the neighborliness of Alberta that I think is kind of special, because all the engineers and geologists and the MBAs, they are problem solvers. That's what they do, and not just the oil and gas industry, but all of the other industries in agriculture. It's always struck me as a distinct part of it, and I wonder if there's some problem-solving ability to get a pipeline built that is as safe as people expect it to be. And the new Trans Mountain line has been in service for a year and a half, running flawlessly.
Tell by the technology that's on top of the pipe what's going to happen if there's a moose that crosses a path, if there's a leak, or if there's corrosion on the pipe. They can tell that before it actually happens. So I don't know how there's going to be a leak. They double hull the stuff through the rivers. It's to such a degree now, the safety, that it's gone beyond even, in my mind, any possibility on the new stuff. I know that from time to time people hear about these pipes that burst down in the U.S. Well, that's 50, 70-year-old infrastructure that was built at a much less degree of safety and engineering that the current stuff is. Like we have over-engineered and over-safety the stuff, which is not a bad thing. I don't mind that. But we're ready now, and people have to have more confidence in it. We don't have those single-hulled tankers like the Exxon Valdez and the other ones that, 20, 30 years ago that would be single-hulled and hit a rock and oil would spill everywhere. We have double-hulled tankers. We have ballast laws. We have so many new laws that were brought about by the federal government and, in fact, the international community, that it's just not the same risk factor that it used to be.
Well, you mentioned tankers. There's a place on the coast, pristine. There's sea otters there, whales, mussels.
Are you talking about my house in Vancouver Island? Because that's what I got there. I have the sea otter family that lives right there. No,
right there.
I love the place,
it's a common sight. No, I'm thinking of Prince William Sound.
Okay.
Where Valdez is, but it's also true of the rest. And the people there have a real strong sense of the natural place, and yet they're shipping oil out of Alaska.
Well, that's because they're Americans.
Every day.
And they're not stupid. They don't do a tanker ban because they recognize the realities of life. And those tankers are going right up and down Canadian waters constantly, passing by exactly where we are not allowed to be. Meanwhile, the St. Lawrence has tankers going up every single day from countries that, 500,000 barrels a day, from countries that don't respect human rights and frankly add no value at all to Canada. It's just costing us money.
Yeah.
The truth is, it would be far better for the Canadian public to get even if we went to the West Coast, to get that, go through the Panama Canal and get it back up the St. Lawrence from Canada. They would get a value from it long term, including the fact that most of the people on that East Coast get their revenue from Alberta because they're flying in and out every single day. And as a guy that used to be in Ottawa, I would be joined with direct flights every day from Toronto to Fort McMurray, and those flights would be absolutely chock-a-block full of people and workers from all across Canada, mostly Atlantic Canada.
So the implementation of the MOU on the BC side is going to be, no doubt, the topic of a lot of discussion. And
well, it's not really the jurisdiction of BC, to be clear. I mean, I understand it's easy to say no when it's not your decision. And I understand why they're taking that position. It's politics. I don't like playing politics. I'm not a very good politician, obviously. I like to tell truth to power and truth to people. And maybe that's a little different for Alberta. But when it doesn't matter if you say no or not, well, it's easy to say no. But Prime Minister Carney has a jurisdiction, and the federal cabinet has a jurisdiction. They're the ones that have to decide yes or no. And they've said yes under conditions. Mm-hmm. And we're satisfying those conditions, and they know we're going to satisfy those conditions because we've done such a great job in Alberta on satisfying those conditions. We're the leader in Canada on Indigenous relationships. We're the leader in Canada in safety, in all of the oil and gas issues that actually plague the industry. They are usually solved out of Alberta, and the people, the people from BC that are in the oil and gas industry are interchangeable between the Albertans. They come into Alberta and work and go back and forth. We love it. We love that. And same as Saskatchewan. I mean, we're a big family in the oil and gas sector. And now we've got lithium added to that, which is kind of cool. I mean, the lithium part of it is an equation people don't talk about, but it's absolutely staggering when you think about the possibilities there. But it's all from oil and gas activity.
One thing I wanted to touch on is the Canadian relationship with the United States. Obviously, it's hardwired into our economy because of infrastructure.
Best friend forever.
But there's still strings to it right now, and some unease. When the Prime Minister spoke recently in Davos, he made a speech that is being talked about in The Economist and the financial pages of the world's
It was
most
a grown-up
influential press.
speech.
What did you take away from that speech?
I was very proud of him.
Do you think that he has found a path for Canada to deal with uncertain times?
I think he has to, and yes, he's a grown-up. It's nice to have a grown-up in that office. He's not with my party, so he's a liberal, but it's.
Well, you're being pretty generous to him because you are a conservative and he's a liberal.
Yeah, but I speak truth. He's doing the right thing.
In terms of the Alberta relationship, Canadian relationship with the U.S. and President Trump, what has the Alberta approach been? You've spoken about the grand bargain as a Canadian thing. Is there a grand bargain with the United States?
Well, it's pretty hard to deal with somebody that changes their mind every day, and that doesn't have a clear vision on what they expect and how they want to be treated, and how they can treat others. And I had some hope for Prime Minister Trump in relation to some of his files, and it's very disappointing. I think he's hurting a lot of people that have no other choice, like the poor people. If you're rich, nothing's changing on your table with President Trump. But if you're poor, you're probably thinking about what you're going to buy for groceries. And I think that oftentimes leaders forget about that. But the good news is the politicians change. And I think this is Trump's last term, and I don't think that we will have those ramifications for a long, long time. He's changing things. He's creating chaos amongst many of his allies. And I think what that does is, certainly in my mind, is, fool me once, is the old adage. And I think that Canadians right now are thinking very seriously about other opportunities. And that's why we have this MOU. And that's why we have the opportunity to build this pipeline to the coast, because we recognize that the Americans could shut us down tomorrow. Let's say Venezuelan crude gets up to 4 million barrels a day, which I don't think it will, but back to where it was a long time ago. You think they're going to buy our crude if they can buy it for there less? Of course not. That's why we have to find other places to sell it to, and that means the Pacific, not the Atlantic, but the Pacific, because they have more expensive transportation costs, and we can do it in half the amount of days to Asia that they can do from the other side. So there's some competitive things there, but we have to change things, and the people of the United States get to decide whether they want that president or those kind of things in the future. And the truth is, I don't think many of them do. I know that he's strong in some circles, but there's a lot of pain yet to come, and it's still as a result of the things he's already done. So hopefully we see some grown-ups. As I mentioned, Prime Minister Carney, I think, has been a grown-up, even though I'm not in the same political stripe as he is. I like to see a grown-up there because I think people do better, especially poor people that can't fend for themselves. Sometimes, have no other choice. But if you take care of them, everybody else is taken care of as well.
Now, Alberta has always been very focused on Washington, D.C., relationships there. The Premier's been to the U.S. since the inauguration a little over a year ago. Has that investment in the American relationship created any advantages? I know no one's celebrating that right now because of the friction, but what does it mean to have that level of engagement?
I have a great Premier. She's been awesome. She's been right out in front. She contacted the Americans immediately and talked to the administration and said, how can we be a better partner? And we've made a couple of pitches to them, I think 2 or 3 pitches so far, in a pitch deck, saying, these are some things we bring to the table and how we can work together to make things better for the Midwest refiners, for your strategic plan long-term. We talked about a number of different things that we could help them with, and I think they were shocked, to be honest, at first, and then I think the administration has seen Alberta as an outlier to, for instance, Ontario and different provinces, because we're prepared to sit at the table, discuss things, and get to what we need to do in order to keep our relationship open and keep the flow of trade going. And I would say that our Premier has truly been a leader on that, and it's proven out that she took the right approach. And why I say that is because we're not suffering the same way they are in Ontario and other jurisdictions. Most of our products are tariff-free. Some are not. Some of the small tool manufacturers in the oil and gas industry, for instance, that use steel from China, they're suffering and they're going through some pain right now. But for the most part, Alberta's doing pretty good, and most Albertans are doing pretty good because we took a different approach to it.
Now, I've yet to encounter a First Nation in Canada that doesn't speak about its responsibility for the environment in its territories. No different in Northern Alberta. For First Nations on the North Coast, where we've seen over the years from different ones, whether they're part of one organization or another, they have issues about the environment. What do you think they can learn from how Northern Alberta First Nations have engaged in the economy and protected the environment? Because we're hearing that from them, aren't we?
They are doing it there.
Yeah.
It's about trust. I mean, they've been lied to a few times. Sitting down, talking to them, understanding their perspective, showing them that it's real, that we care about these things, and making sure they're in charge of the environmental aspects of it, especially on the coast. Very important.
Well, you've come to the coast. I haven't seen you here at previous mineral roundups. Good on you for being Alberta's envoy here. I think this is
well,
a chance.
I'm from BC, and I have a place in
got a BC
Vancouver
passport.
Island. The only thing Alberta doesn't have is an ocean with fish in it. Okay, because I love fishing. I'm an outdoors man. I'm a trapper and a hunter, and I love the outdoors, and I love the coast of BC. And the last thing I want to see is an oil spill.
That's something that everyone on the coast shares. You're not the only member of Premier Smith's cabinet who is doing some outreach here. There seems to be a real focused push to figure out what conversations you need to be in. Is that something that's going to continue on?
I think Canadians and Canadian politicians should be more active in all provinces, not from a political perspective, but more from a helpful perspective and a business perspective, promoting what we can do with other provinces and how we can work together to make things better for the people of those provinces, all of them, not just one of them, but all of them, because we all share things that are our strengths, and we all share things that are our weaknesses. So if we use our strengths to bring up everybody else's weaknesses, we'll be very strong together. But we have to have trust. We have to recognize that First Nations are where they are as a result of the relationship in the past, but we have to know that relationship can change and will change if we are committed to it. But we can't do it unless we sit down and talk to them. And the last thing, as I said, anybody wants is an oil spill or any kind of spill on the coast or anywhere. Nobody wants that. That's why we need to make sure those people that are going to be directly affected the most have the control of that mechanism.
Mm-hmm. Just want to wrap this up on one note, and that's the next generation and young people and how they're seeing the world. We've seen universities that used to teach petroleum engineering stop doing that, and I understand Calgary is now back doing that.
I was just going to say they got a record number of enrollees now that are looking at getting into the petroleum sector.
I'd just like to end things looking to the next generation that's coming up. They're looking for careers, they're looking for a way to have a good life like their parents had, and there's a lot going on. We've also seen some social trends where for a while it wasn't cool to be involved in the natural resource industry, but maybe there's some rays of hope. I know there's programs in Alberta like the Geologics educational platform. What are you seeing emerge here, Minister, in terms of that?
Well, the first thing is, when you have a Prime Minister say it's the end of oil and gas or the oil sands, young people would probably take that seriously. When you have a Prime Minister say we need to get our energy to the world, I think young people take that seriously. So I think what we've seen is an actual shift from our politicians and our leaders to say, 10 years ago, oil is a bad thing, to today saying, realistically, oil is absolutely essential and necessary, and we're going to feed the oil to the world because it's the best oil in the world to feed to the world. That's what Carney's message is, and as a result, we've seen the U of C. They've brought back some oil and gas programming, and they've told me that they're going to be very aggressive on that front. We've seen some amazing things happen outside of the oil and gas industry for the oil and gas industry. For instance, carbon fiber. Now we've got the technology that can take that oil sands bitumen and spin to carbon fiber, about 30% less expensive than other carbon fibers, which make hockey sticks, cars, even China manufacturers of EVs. There's 2 or 3 of them that make it out of carbon fiber. So there's tremendous potential in the oil sands for carbon fiber. There's also tremendous potential for asphaltenes. So even though as we move forward, maybe oil is not seen as maybe the choice for everybody, the truth is those other products, those spin-offs, those manufacturing jobs, the Dow chemical jobs, the petrochemical jobs, the specialty heavy oils, light oils, those things are going to attract a lot of people that have the opportunity to get wealth from that, even though it's not directly related to the oil and gas industry, because there's so many opportunities with that industry. But I'll be clear with you, I think I've seen a true shift in the last number of years, just a couple of years, where young people are very excited about it, because the reality is, if you want a great quality of life and a great income to be able to do all those things that are the Canadian dream, you can do that with an oil and gas career. You can't do that at McDonald's. Now, I'm a lawyer, and I've told my kids, trades.
Look, this has been a fascinating conversation. We could go maybe twice as long, but
10 times longer, Stewart. I can
10
talk all
times.
day.
All right, we'll come back in future then.
Good.
And
maybe you could come visit me in Fort McMurray. We could take you and
I will do
take
that.
people on a tour and
Yes.
show them how amazing it is. It's a
I haven't been
great
there
place.
for a decade, and the greatest impression that a person can get from this whole issue is by putting boots on the ground and walking around. I saw the bison in that reclaimed site north of town, north of the city of Fort McMurray, and you're realizing, wow, there's a vast amount of water being stored from the oil sands process, but there's also a vast amount of land that's being fully reclaimed. They bring that soil back and they restore the original habitat, and in some ways even a little bit better.
Well, we take the poison out of the earth, that
Yeah.
thing called oil, and we actually get to sell it. The biggest
It's a
reclamation
pretty good
program in the
combination.
entire world, right there in northern Alberta. And all jokes aside, it's an amazing product. It does so much for so many people, and people don't realize it. But the things that have been paying for the schools and the hospitals and the roads right across Canada, it's the oil sands.
It certainly is. That's a verifiable fact. So this has been Alberta's Minister of Energy and Minerals, Brian Jean, my guest on Power Struggle today. Thank you, Minister, for being here.
Thank you, and thanks to all your listeners. Really a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If there's a takeaway, one takeaway from today's conversation, it's that Alberta's energy is inseparable from global markets, from geopolitical realities and the policy choices made here at home in Canada. And whether it's market access or infrastructure or Canada's relationship with the United States, the decisions being made now will echo for decades for Canadians. And we've been lucky to have it all brought together here today. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Power Struggle on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. You might be listening to this episode, you might be watching this episode, wherever you are or however you're getting your podcast. Please share it, because it brings more serious, honest conversations about energy policy, Canada's future, to a wider audience in Canada and around the world. You can find more episodes and information at powerstruggle.ca. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time on Power Struggle.